The Piper and the Rye by Connor J. Inglis. Chapter 1. The American Depression. Life is a strange story of one's own. May it seem a game between the rich and the poor, or even will make a difference. The trick is to not give in to the doubtful hail to the wealthy and powerful, whilst doing nothing to write your own text. The trick is to embrace your passion, to embrace it and aid others with a good mind to do just the same. I was a farm boy. I was raised among the glistening of the green rivers and the chirping of crickets at dusk. I often prowled among the meadows to get a break from others, to gain moments to think to myself and to consider life matters when I needed it. I was by no means a popular boy growing up. In fact, little knew me at all, nor did they care to chat at any time of the day, or let alone simply acknowledge the fact I was there at all. I grew to learn of people's ignorance and strengthened my ability to understand human nature, what people were mostly bound to do or what they weren't. That's why oftentimes I kept to myself. I was indeed a loner, such one that could maintain it for longer periods than most, as it gave me time to think about the things that were important and consider actions deeper that path my future every day of my life. By no means was it an easy matter on my hands, but through faith and practice, I managed. There had been years among years that I thought I was reaching a breaking point of mental distress and emotional depression. Years. Although I knew in my right mind that I had a purpose in this world and I couldn't afford to just give it up and give in to all the doubts and even others who doubted me. I told myself time and time again I wouldn't, and so I never did. You see, one of the hardest things for a man to do is find something he has a passion for and stick with it no matter what. And then to never let himself or others bring down his abilities to carry that passion out. With a plethora of questionability factors that never need to be asked to begin with. Hell, even one's own mind can play the most cunning tricks on them, and I wasn't about to fall a victim. I was smarter than that, and I knew it in heart. If someone wanted to take their time to question my abilities, my purpose even, I wasn't about to stop what I was going to do for that person to attempt to bring me down as much as they deemed necessary among their standards. The trick is to not give up, simple as said. So here I was, a young farm boy, deep in the heart of American country, plagued by small towns of racial discrimination and common prejudice of the day. Sometimes it seemed to me I was far better off never going near a populous town in the area at all, even considering it. There was, though, a fair share of times I've desired company. Many times I've been desperate for it. And as most of, any desperation goes, trouble falls with it. That's what happened Friday, June 7th, 1931. The Great Depression had been plaguing the American country since the October of 1929, and it often felt good to catch the slightest break from any of it. Being so lonesome during such a time was never really ideal for any human, even the ones who wanted to be alone, because a person can only withstand so much of it. I would never find any other argumentative point close to valid or valid at all. Anyways, it was getting late, I was getting tired and on the verge of breaking out of my teen years, as any one teenager would be. I was restless, and I was determined to take the night to myself and to have some fun for a change. Well, as much as I could to get my mind off the farm and work and my ignorant family that I loved dearly, though they had their ways of being a pain in the ass to my hind. Town was close enough to walk to from the farm, or what I like to call my home, so I guess that was always a plus for me. It was a small town. People were considerably more just and more, oddly enough, kinder, just more outgoing than most were set out to be around these parts anyways. I strolled down the whittled-down sidewalks of the old town, or what was left of them, and as I did, I began making my way to Ben's Soup Cafe, which was in fact our only soup cafe here in town. It was also the only one within miles and miles between all the others in the state, surprisingly enough. It was nearest to me, fortunately so I thought. I often stopped there for supper. There was a lot of times our family never had much on the tables, even as farmers, because the land was so dry and the crops, they just didn't grow. And cattle, they were often either killed off or stolen. All we could really do was survive off of what we had access to, be it a local soup cafe or a small neighborhood food mart of some sort. That and defend us from whoever tried to take what was ours from us. Like, we never suspected the damn thing to begin with. I had known the workers at the cafe for years, and they knew me damn well too, I guess. I guess you could say. I was a regular customer, so I was close with the owner too, Ben Ralcom. Ben was a kind and honest heart, but his life wasn't very easy, and on a day-to-day basis it was proof such. Ben was indeed an African-American restaurant owner, though I learned, well, racial prejudice was morally wrong, and many others during that time, though, thought the complete opposite. Well, that was especially true for these parts of the American countryside. I knew every day I saw him again that it was never easy for him. So just as he cared for me growing up, when I was around him, I did my part to stick up for him to the best of my ability when he was around me. He would kindly ask how I was doing upon greeting himself to his presence, and so I would do the same to him thereafter. Why I thought stopping at the cafe before stopping at the old bar was beyond me, other than the fact I was hungry as hell and more irritable at that. So I was there, and there I was. The day faded suddenly, and the afternoon sunset faded through the cafe's old-fashioned windows, rusted among their edges as the metallic lining glistened as the sun went down. I was just about done with the soup I had ordered. I looked at Ben, and he looked at me, as if he could tell exactly what I was thinking, why I was thinking about it. He was the kind of man you could tell what he was feeling through his eyes, and knowing him well enough growing up, I could always say I did the same. As did he. A nod was fair enough to him leaving the cafe because he knew my intent, and I always knew his. So with that, I gave him a nod and took my leave from the cafe. I began to walk to the local bar that I thought about going to before. Well, before I made it more than a foot out the door, I knew in my gut something wasn't right. A white man, elder, tall, and thin, approached the door to the cafe, an accomplice at his side. Oddly suspicious of his manner, and rightfully so, I followed him back in. As he entered and I slipped my way into the shadow of the entrance's corners as he strode towards the counter where Ben stood, tending the liquors and countertops. So there I was, watching, fearfully prepared to do what I must, and whatever it may be, to not let any harm come Ben's way. "So, what can I get for ya lads at this fine hour?" Ben asked cheerfully, though he was in mind just as prepared as I was. "I'll tell you what, partner. You can empty your goddamn register and hit the fucking roads," the tall man snarled aggressively. Unsure of a motive behind any of the incident thus far, I sat in the dark corner of the cafe, still hidden. But by now it was just me, Ben, and the invaders, as all the others had left. The two burglars stood impatient by the counters as Ben slowly but swiftly grabbed his shotgun he kept under the counters, and 3 consecutive shots directly at them, quicker than I'd ever seen before, and surely quicker than they had as well. They lie dead and bloody, surely done for. Ben looked over to me slowly and shook his head in sure sadness, yet sure anger. "Son, I'm afraid I'm in more shit than you know," he said as a tear rolled down his eye. Several others following. I just nodded in assurance, took my hat, and darted out the door, running home in the night's still silence as the moon shined down on the waters. The next morning, I awoke to a small creek, just outside the edge of town, unaware of how I got there, or why. It all just seemed like a blurred rush I couldn't remember the half of. Regardless of it all, I got up short after. I performed a quick stretch and continued walking up the river that, flowed along it. And it was almost overwhelming what flowed through my head every day, because there was so much I could never possibly come close to counting it all. I'd taken a lonesome path in life for as long as I could remember, since I dropped out of school. I knew I was alone, but I also knew I had to keep it together no matter what, and so I did. I understood that. At least I reminded myself of it as often as I could and held on to my values the best I could too. So it was a constant struggle, but somehow, some way, I managed every day of my life up until the end of it. And let me tell you, it had some crazy bends. Some I regretted and some I cherished. But the fact is, life ain't gonna tell you what to expect, and it's more like a wild adventure, really. At least that's how I thought of it. I continued to think about it all as I neared my home, or what was left of it after the start of the Depression. And my father sat outside the porch as if he knew I'd be coming back then. He smoked a thin pipe. Ashes drizzled from the ends of it as I began making my way up the porch deck. He looked at me and somewhat angrily and infuriated, so I looked back, waiting for him to ask me a question. I probably wasn't going to be able to answer. Son, just what the hell do you think this is exactly? I looked back at him after the crude statement, preparing to open the door to the house. What do you mean by that exactly? I asked in a manner that was quietly shy. You know damn well what I mean, son, and I expect you to acknowledge such by now. He snarled back in a tone that proved his anger. The thing was, I did know what he meant, and when I thought about it even more, it was like falling into a black hole that never ended, and it lingered. Oh, did it? And so it did. I knew I was unemployed. I was a roamer, a lonesome one. But a roamer nonetheless. My father he never liked living with the fact he knew my distress was impeding my ability to do much of anything the average Joe could or would ever do, such as getting a job or paying taxes or shit, even finding someone I could call my love one day. I just didn't see it happening then, and my father, he knew the motivation wasn't there, and he was always afraid of it he was always afraid it would never, so he despised me for it, because he never understood why. So in a very short burst of mixed emotions, I continued in the house, swiftly and moodily so, making my way to the single room we had where I slept when I could. Mom never really had a kitchen, so most of the cooking was done outside, and we farmed what we could harvest or managed to harvest in these desperate times. I thought about it for a minute, grown hungry by my desperations. I held in the tears that wanted to lash out because I knew I couldn't even let them if I tried. I saw Mother outside cooking once more, what she could at least. My younger brother sat by the back door. Not a word spoken and not a bit of silence broken. He sat, head down, and knees together, as if troubled by something he didn't want a damn other to know about. So I walked by him and uttered the words, "It'll be okay," softly twice, as if to comfort him, regardless of my knowledge of what indeed troubled him so. He knew I only meant comfort. I knew he acknowledged just that. Father walked in, irritated by my recent mannerism, but aware yelling any longer would only harm it further. So he didn't say a word and plopped down on one of the only wooden bar stools we had in the room, sitting down against a table beside it. He sighed and then proceeded to look at our latest newspaper, and shortly after looked to our home's second window besides the table, and through it the rising sun glistened across the room, hitting the other wall an array of orange light. Despite his constant nagging, I knew he too was distressed, and quite possibly more than I could possibly realize myself. I was still young, 18, and I knew I had to figure all these things out on my own. And just as I did think of it, my father turned to me and he said to me softly and raspily, "One day you'll get it, son. One day you will. You will." Damn, he was right. Because October 5th, 1962, I was drafted to the Vietnam War. A bloodbath jungle. A hell-bred nightmare. I knew it, but I also knew I didn't have a choice. And failing my country wasn't, well, it was the last thing I wanted to do. So I didn't. Instead, I embraced it, even though soldiers were often being spat on just for fighting it because of its lost cause, and that I never found so invalid until I hit the front lines of war. Until I killed my first VC, the first day in the jungle. It was never easy, but when would it ever be? Chapter 2, With Valor and Dignity. Vietnam, January 1966. The heat was hot and the war left a bitter bite on us all. In fact, I knew it was only going to get worse. I was a lieutenant stationed to take charge of a small team of 6, including myself. We were at the nearest American military camp in Phu Bang, just south of continent Binh Dinh, on the east coast from besides Laos. We'd been there only a day, and shortly after, the evening fell, and night shortly after, occupied by the persistent and potent smell of barbecues and such for the afternoon. Bruno was our camp cook. We didn't usually have a designated private working the grills, but at that time I suppose we did. I sat cross-legged under a crooked palm, looked at the falling sun as 5 American Huey choppers flew over us and into the ill-lit mountain range looking over Laos. Dan sat next to me, radio in his hand, in charge of taking op orders and radio commands. He was like a brother to me, and in fact, he was the only one I had within miles and miles across the damn globe. He looked at me as I sat still, head slightly down after the choppers passed us, my helmet slightly covering my eyes. "You know, shit's a hellstorm, Connor, but I just want you to remember, we always got each other's backs in it all, alright?" I looked back at him after his comforting statement. I know. As I said, I sighed after it, as if in a slight mess of comfort and distress. I sighed at him slightly to prove him I meant it despite the stressful sigh. And he did back. At that moment I knew we never failed to guard each other, with all we had, and even if it meant our own lives. Thereafter, and shortly so, I fell into a deep sleep. Dark set in, and soon the whole camp was out, with men taking turns watching perimeters at all times as the rest of us tried to sleep, get some rest for the next morn.